Bueno, ahora vamos a dar paso a otra eminencia. La verdad que no paramos de traer talento. Ahora va a seguir con su keynote nuestro próximo speaker. Insisto, otra vez, un honor presentarlo. Se trata de Caspar Llewellyn Smith, que es el Chief Product Officer en The Guardian y, ojo, miembro del comité ejecutivo de The Guardian de News and Media. Tiene un montón de cosas para contarnos y hoy nos va a hablar de las lecciones que todavía The Guardian no pudo aprender del todo y que está haciendo un esfuerzo para entender cómo manejar el ingreso basado en lectores. So, Caspar, thank you very much for joining us today. Great to have you and to meet you. I leave you the audience.
Great, thank you very much indeed. And thanks for having me here. It's just a real pleasure. I'm just going to speak for about 15 minutes is the idea. Let me try and share my screen because I've got some slides and then I'll just talk through them. Tell me if this is now working. Okay, I hope you can all see that now. I'm Caspar Llewellyn Smith, that's right, the Chief Product Officer at The Guardian. I've been in that role for about 4 or 5 months, the whole time of the COVID pandemic, really. Before that, I was the editor of The Guardian's website for about the last 5 years. And I'm going to talk to you about some of the lessons we at The Guardian are still learning about what it takes to become a successful reader revenues business. I was just listening to a bit of what Aaron from Google was saying about their playbook, and I tell you, we could have done with some of that 5 years ago when we first headed off sort of down this route. So that is the first lesson. Let me just get this right. Lesson 1. Okay, so The Guardian was founded in Manchester in the north of England in 1821. Apologies if this sounds a bit like a history lesson to begin with. But the point is that 199 years later, we have millions of readers all over the world. Last month, we had 230 million unique browsers. I think 215,000 of those unique browsers were in Argentina. So I say thank you very much. Thanks for reading us. Our business model had always been based on newsstand sales and advertising. But 5 years ago, in the summer of 2015, we felt like we'd reached a crossroads. Newspaper sales were in long-term structural decline. And now the digital advertising that we were counting on was suddenly flooding towards Facebook and flooding towards our friends at Google. That meant that we were a bit overstretched. We overinvested in some areas. And The Guardian doesn't have a conventional proprietor. We don't have shareholders. We're not part of a larger organization. We are truly independent. We exist just to do the journalism. And it was a real concern that we might run out of money, and that would be the end of it. We wouldn't reach our 200th anniversary. That summer, we had a new chief executive, we had a new editor-in-chief, and they asked a group of 4 of us to think about the future and what we were going to do. We hadn't put up a paywall. And that was partly one of the reasons, was the reason that we managed to bring our journalism to so many more millions of readers around the world. So should we do that? Or what about developing a membership proposition based on something like live events? And we had a tiny fledgling membership set up at the time, but very small. And then one afternoon, we drew the picture that I hope you can see on the screen, which is really simple. It just said, look, we can develop a model that's based on live events or on giving our readers a branded Guardian shopping bag, something like that. Or we can just try asking for money and make a very direct appeal to readers based on the strength of the role that we think our journalism plays in society, an appeal that was just really based on our purpose. And if we start that way, at the top of the y-axis in this picture, we can always head in the direction of the x-axis. You can go from top left to bottom right. We can try an emotional appeal, and if it doesn't work, we can try something a bit more transactional. We can, then move down in that direction. Starting the other way, trying to go from bottom right to top left, that was always going to be much harder to do. If you begin in a transactional relationship, is it going to be harder to then talk about your values and your purpose? So that's what we did. We took what was really the easiest path, the most straightforward, obvious thing to do, although it didn't seem at all obvious at the time. It seemed a really weird thing to be doing. We just asked readers directly for money. And that proved a really great move. It turned out that there were hundreds of thousands of people willing to hand over their cash and open up their checkbooks or their bank cards once we worked out how to ask them for it.
Caspar, sorry for the interruption. Do you mind turning on your camera so the image fits? Yes, thank you.
It was off and it must have come on again. So if you didn't see the previous picture,
that way, yes, that's the way. Thank you.
Now you can see that. Okay. This is the picture I was talking about. So sorry about that. Saying make an appeal based on people's belief in the value of Guardian journalism. Start top left. You can always move bottom right to give people stuff, things like bags or whatever you want to do. It's much harder to go the other direction. So that was the first thing that we did. That was lesson 1 of the 6 quick lessons I'm going to try and provide. Lesson 2. So look, I talked about our belief in the role that our journalism plays in society and our purpose. But what actually was that? I'd been part of this group of people thinking about the strategy, staring at spreadsheets, looking at numbers. But I felt like it wasn't really up to me or the other 3 people with me to define our purpose, our reason for existing, these big existential questions. So what we did is ask the editor-in-chief. And so she took about a year to write it, but about in 2017, wrote the long essay that I've taken a picture from here, which articulates The Guardian's mission. It was really important to do this. She, the editor, was still quite new in her post. She's only the 11th editor that The Guardian has had in our 199-year history. And it felt really important for her to talk about her vision for who we are, what we are, the role we play. Now, that was partly for everyone in the newsroom and the rest of the organisation to hear from her. But it was really crucial, too, in helping us tell the story of The Guardian to the world at large and why the journalism we do really matters. So look, many companies in the world in many different sectors are now talking about their purpose and trying to really articulate that reason for their existence. And I think it's really important that we as news organisations take the time and effort to do that too. It sometimes might feel obvious to us who work in newsrooms the whole time. It's not necessarily obvious to the rest of the world, particularly at a time when, as we know, trust in news organisations and lots of the media is crumbling generally. So if you have a good story to tell, think about that and think about how you try and tell it. Lesson 3. Okay, so we've answered the big existential question, why do we exist? Why do I come to work in the morning? I'm in the Guardian offices today. I'm one of a handful of people who are coming in despite the pandemic to try and keep working here. But how do you constantly keep communicating this to your audience? The editor had published an article, but hundreds of thousands of people may have read that, but how do you keep doing that on a daily basis? Well, what we did was develop a short message that we added at the bottom of many of our articles, which was really a new channel for us, and we nicknamed the message The Epic. It's called The Epic in The Guardian, this message that we've crafted. That message saw us directly ask readers for money, a voluntary contribution, based on the strength of our purpose. And just the important thing to understand here really is the extent to which we rigorously and relentlessly tested that message in a very kind of pure product way. And I think over just the last 3 years, we've tested, I think it's over 600 variants of that message and run endless kind of A/B tests and understood the efficacy of different variants. We found out that longer messages work better than short ones, somewhat surprisingly. We found that really specific appeals tended to work better than anything too generic, and so on. And now we flex and can change that messaging to respond to the news agenda essentially in real time. And lots of other organisations have copied doing this since, from The Independent in London to places like BuzzFeed. So this is just an example of other people who've appropriated this in The Guardian. And we're very pleased that other people have managed to learn this lesson from us already. I think it's proved really successful for lots of other news organisations too. Okay, lesson 4. Okay, this is kind of interesting. Like the title of this slide says, your brand matters. I think the brand matters more than ever in a relationship business model. And I think you really want to look after your brand wherever it appears. Look, lots of readers come to us directly to the Guardian website on a regular daily basis. We've got a really large number of regular people. But sure, lots of readers arrive via Google searching for something, or they come via Twitter, or they come via Facebook. Last year, one of our audience team in the newsroom, a close colleague of mine, saw a weird spike in traffic to a story that was 6 years old. It was a terrible story about a large number of Christians being killed in Pakistan. And Nick, could see that I think 51,000 page views had come almost entirely from Facebook, that the audience was mainly viewing the story on their mobile phones, that the audience was global and mostly new to us. They hadn't visited us before. We could tell that we weren't promoting the story ourselves using our analytics tool. And we could see that the story was likely driven by a series of very niche Facebook pages. We also can measure attention time on our stories, and we could see that many readers were spending just a couple of seconds on the story, which is actually 942 words long, right? You'd need to spend longer than that to read the thing properly. So it was clear to us and clear to that particular audience editor that whatever was happening wasn't about the journalism itself. This story was being used by a right-wing group to push a racist agenda. The idea that the media wasn't covering stories of Christians being persecuted around the world. So how do we feel about this at The Guardian? We're a sort of left-wing liberal news organisation. We felt pretty bad about it, that people were using our journalism in ways that we thought was irresponsible and taking it out of context and unfairly doing so. And already for years, we'd included our logo on the images that appear when readers share a Guardian story on social media, which was a response to data and research that shows that many people, as you know, are unaware of the source of the journalism they read. The day we saw that this particular story was being appropriated to suit someone else's malicious agenda, and I think it was the same day, a couple of engineers who now report to me found a way to add the year to the image on older news stories. So we could make it much harder to spin an old news story as a new outrage. And so that's what happens to every story we post to Twitter or Facebook now. And to me, that's actually a really great example of a pretty lo-fi way to actually really protect your brand, look after it in spaces where you can't necessarily just wrap your arms around it yourself. Okay, lesson 5. I hope you're still with me. Lesson 5 says, tell your own story. So beginning in 2015-16, readers started voluntarily giving us money in vast numbers. And unsurprisingly, we saw big spikes in contributions whenever something big happened in the news. The more readers you have around the world, there's a greater number who are likely to put their hand in their pocket and choose to support you. And the chart on the right shows that series of surges in financial contributions to The Guardian. I think if you squint, you can probably see the word Brexit there, and also something like the Australian bushfires. We have a really significant audience in Australia, and when we were writing about that story in a way that I think readers there really responded to in a kind of really Guardian empathetic way, we do a huge amount of environmental reporting, which we were linking to this. Readers responded by putting their hands in their pockets to support us financially. But the point about this is that as well as these big news events, well, you can see also here there's original Guardian reporting. To the left of that picture, I think you can see the words Cambridge Analytica. Now, that was a big Guardian story read around the world. We hitched an appeal to readers to that story, an investment we made in investigative journalism, and that's an investment that paid off. And then I hope you can also just about see the words 1 million moment. This was the moment at which we passed 1 million paying supporters. And at the point at which we did so, what did we do? We celebrated that. We told the readers about it. And we brought them a message that said, you should support us too, because look what we can do if we work together. If you give us your financial support, we can produce great journalism. So I think we've become really good at telling our own story. And the other image I think you can see on this picture is some artwork, some images that we're going to be using for a campaign that will be shortly running in the next couple of weeks, based on the strength of our environmental reporting around the world. And the final sixth lesson, look, there's thousands of lessons. I could talk about all of this stuff for days. But I suppose the point of this slide is just to say, look, anyone embarking down this path, you're going to make mistakes. We've made loads of mistakes. We did, as I said, we did the simple things first. We went for the low-hanging fruit. There was quite a lot of that for The Guardian. That was a great move. But it gets harder. It gets harder to find new readers, new prospective customers, new paying customers. I think one of the mistakes that we've made in the last couple of years, one of the things I worry about, is that we've created too many products. We've made it in a way too easy for people to give money to us. And I say this as our Chief Product Officer. You can give us a one-off financial contribution. You can give us a contribution on a recurring, ongoing basis. You can also, or alternatively, subscribe to the premium tier of our app, because we thought there was some value in that, and some people wanted something a bit more transactional. Or there's another tier, there's a more expensive digital subscription where we can bundle some things together. We give you another app as well. Now listen, I would love it if anyone listening, whatever I said before, 250,000 people who read us last month in Argentina, anyone wants to make a contribution or take out a subscription, please do. I just worry sometimes that we've made all of this a bit too confusing. And this screenshot shows us bombarding visitors to our homepage with a range of offers. We're using an advertising slot at the top to say subscribe to The Guardian Weekly, which is a weekly magazine that we publish. There's some messaging in the masthead saying support us, contribute or subscribe. And then there's a big advert down the bottom saying support The Guardian, which I think probably takes you to a contributions page. We've just overcomplicated this stuff a little bit. And we absolutely need, I think, to make it simpler. And it's a cliche now, really, but we really need to learn how we can become more customer-centric and really put the customer at the heart of everything in a reader relationship strategy. That sounds obvious, I know, but sometimes you forget about it. You definitely need to be an agile organization because of the mistakes we're going to make along the way. That's been really crucial to us. I could have given an entirely separate talk about journalists. I used to be a journalist working with commercial colleagues, working with product, people in cross-functional teams, the upsize and downsize with something like the OKR process that we pursue. There may be a chance to ask me any questions about that if you like. I can talk for days about it. Here, I guess I'm saying agility is crucial. Just never forget to remember some basic principles too. Or maybe sort of flip that a bit. I mean, I think it's not totally melodramatic to say that The Guardian would have been in real trouble if we hadn't made the switch to a reader relationship model 5 years ago. We still make a substantial amount of money from advertising, but if we didn't have these new revenues, well, we wouldn't be here. Even without the impact of the coronavirus on our business, which has been severe, I'm actually incredibly confident about our next 200 years because we've diversified our reader revenue base and because we've made that direct connection with readers. I think we are really clear about our principles and our values and our purpose. But thinking about the next 200 years, look, however old you grow, you can never stop learning. And we've got a huge amount to still keep going at here. And I'm sure I can learn from lots of you people listening today. And that's me. Thank you very much.
Caspar, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your learnings. I think that you have quite a lot. You mentioned 6, but I think that there should be more.
Yeah.
Of course. We are a little bit short of time, so I have a few questions to make that I'm going to make them in the next soft hub with you. So maybe we can keep the conversation there. So okay. Thank you very much again. Thank you very much for joining us. See you in a couple of minutes in the next space.